What up, outliers? Quick market update. I got two things on the agenda. The first one, quick look at the broad markets. Second thing, GameStop earnings. We got to see what's going on in there. So let's dive right in. Today, the market really was all over the place. So if we actually jump into SPY here, we can use something like SPX. And let's take a look at what it did intraday. So I want to look at today 1 minute and take a look at this. Started off a little bit of a gap up over yesterday, then crashed down, based, crashed down, then rallied all the way up and out. It really started catching wind, kind of like 10, and then it caught another breath of fresh air right at around 11. The reason why I know 11 is because I was just getting ready to place some trades and I saw it start running. So I actually held off for a little bit and then kind of entered when it was basing in here. But what this means for me is the market is still in this highly tenuous position. I don't view this as ultra bullish, especially if you look at the S&P 500, the percentage of stocks that are above their 50-day moving averages. It actually declined today. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 was up today. So what does that tell me? It tells me that there was a handful of stocks that drove this movement. And then if we take a look over at the Qs, we can see a lot of it came from the Qs. This is tech really starting what I consider to be a really, really important price movement. And I'm going to zoom this out now just a little bit and show you what I'm talking about. Now, in the analysis of a trend, what we want to see is higher highs, higher lows. And so we have a low here, we have a higher low here, we have a higher low here, and then we kind of hit this term high, peak high for this time frame that we start falling off. So then we create this low. Now, this is a lower low compared to this, but it maintains the broader trend for the time frame. So now, in my opinion, this price level becomes quite important because if this starts to fall at or below this low, that starts to confirm, again, in my opinion, an actual downtrend. And it still clearly is downtrending in a short-term time frame, right? So if we look something close to this, again, near-term high, and we just draw a general trend line, like clearly downward sloping. But the way I'm looking at this is the market has a little bit of a decision to make. And the reason why I'm cutting this candle off is to kind of fit it with this other period. This is overfitting this specific line from like a TA drawing perspective. I don't really care. It's not for that purpose. It's just to show the broader trend that we're seeing here, where we are still getting slightly higher lows, which is, again, important. But this is really, really delicate right now, in my opinion. So I'm keeping a really close eye. I do not have a lot of tech exposure here yet. I start to get interested in tech if we start looking at stuff above, I forgot that's a wrong tool. Let me grab trend line. Or price level. I like it above there. I start adding it to a closer watch list above here. Obviously, I look at it every day, but I need to see how it behaves in here. I need to see if it starts rallying up and challenging these zones that show like kind of lighter volume, right? So it's hitting right on this coming up, right on this volume node, has to cross up above that. But then after that, it's kind of smooth sailing, as you could tell from the volume profile, until you get up towards here. So, and that would be starting to, resume a broader uptrend, which again, we just have to see how it behaves. From a breadth perspective, I do see both things like the money flow index is positive sloping here. And I see that the RSI is crossing over the EMA, which is also good because it just indicates to me a near-term change in momentum that you're kind of seeing going on here. But we're still right around that kind of 50% level on the RSI. So when it's hanging around there, kind of, in my opinion, go either way. But I like that it was well bought here. And it's moving up on sub-average volume for 25-day periods. So yeah, overall, really interested to see where this goes. I think this is, again, not a point to start throwing a bunch of money around for me, at least the way that I trade. I am heavily utilized, but it's just not in stuff like tech. All right, now let's get on to kind of the fun stuff, which is obviously GameStop. So GameStop reported earnings today, and it closed at $23.45. Right now, it's trading around $21.60. So we're down about 10%. I don't love that look, but yeah, I feel like there's so much that goes into this earnings release and so much of it I don't know. So I don't actually feel comfortable speaking too heavily about like the broader context of Q2 and the way that the company typically performs. But if we take a look at some of our prior earnings, we can at least get an idea of how GameStop tends to behave, which is generally inside, right? So as I look through this movement leading into earnings, it was up at 46, then it came down to 28. This is obviously Q1, which is a little bit of a busy time for GME. Here, it came in at 15.5, came out at 13. So like this is generally standard fare from what I can tell from previous earnings releases, but like the broader context behind it, I'm not fully read into. But when I looked through the financials, it really didn't look bad to me. So starting from the top here, I was disappointed in that there was no statement or anything attached to it. And again, the community told me to expect that, so I didn't have my hopes very high, but I still really wanted to see them say something about having $4 billion in cash, which is great. It's really good that they have a bunch in cash. But from an investor standpoint, it's also like, I want to know what the general idea is. Again, I know that there's something to be said about keeping like a competitive advantage by not necessarily forecasting all your moves and stuff like that. Like that makes sense. I'm okay with that. But I would just really, really love if at the very least, they would give us something. We're looking to invest into the company, like literally any words associated with the cash pile that's sitting there would have been welcomed, at least from my perspective, to give some ideas. But let's go through this. So net sales came in positive, which was great, 0.789 billion. So positive is good, although we obviously came down from the 1.164. We saw net income at 14.8 million, which is super important because it was a loss year over year prior. And in cash right now, there's 4.204 billion. So again, they're sitting on a absolutely tremendous cash pile, which is exciting. But the excitement is slightly tempered for me right now just because I want to know what they're doing. I want to know what's going on with this money. So I'd say it partially in jest because I do think Cohen is super smart, way smarter than I am. So I know that he's making the moves that he's making for a reason, or at least that's what I assume. So it doesn't bother me that much, but I just want to know. I just want to know. So let's scroll through this a little bit. So we can see net sales, that came down a little bit. I actually don't like to see that too much when we have sales contracting. And we can see that cost of sales has come down pretty massively. So net income came through pretty big time. A big part of that, obviously, you can tell stemming from here, where we have, again, much lower cost acquisition for sales. Operating loss has contracted pretty meaningfully. So overall, they seem to be in a pretty good position. Now, I don't know how this leads into follow-on earnings, but what I can say is the net income per share is pretty impressive in this sense. This is showing 4 pennies. So the other couple things I want to highlight, let me see a little bit further down here. So we can see cash and equivalents, securities, merchandise inventories, assets, all of that essentially is about the same. So merchandise inventories has come down a bit, which I find slightly interesting, but I also know that the company is trying to pivot a lot and lean into its successful stores and maybe start navigating a little bit away from its less successful stores, which again is just really smart for a company that's in this perspective. Accounts payable has come down quite a bit from 378 to 220. And liabilities about for long-term debt, for long-term debt is about static. This, I don't expect to see much change in this, but if there is a change in this, it typically tells me something's going on in a company. But that's why I look at that. and total liabilities is down, as I think we generally expect. So long-term net debt, 12.4 versus 23.6. And total liabilities, about the same, call it relatively unchanged. You can see stockholders' equity is moved from 1267 to 4383. So yeah, I think from a company perspective, like if I were like a value or a fundamental investor, which again, being completely honest with you guys, I'm not, I am a trader. But when I look at this, I see a company that seems like it's in a decent position to start doing something. But I also have to be honest, like right now, if I'm looking at this company, I'm thinking it's not doing much that I can see. Like I'm not seeing a bunch of capital improvements, massive plans coming out to expand the company, pivot the company, none of that. And again, my guess is Cohen probably has some ideas going on in the back end that, you know, he's probably just playing the game a little closer to his chest for, you know, whatever reasons he has. But again, from a trader's perspective, it's kind of like, I need to know why I would put my money somewhere. And for something like this, if you have really strong belief in Cohen, the business, the ability to pivot, then sure, I totally get that. But from, again, like an objective analysis standpoint, based on just the numbers, not the story, not the qualitative components, but just the numbers, this looks relatively light. It's obviously profitable to a degree. It's sitting on a literally war chest of cash. But as I continue to remind people, we have to do something with the cash, because cash just sitting there, really, it doesn't help us very much. Cash needs to be used to drive business. So hopefully, and again, that's my underlying assumption, they're just not ready to share it yet, there's a plan for this cash. So we can see sale from property and equipment, right? So we're starting to unwind things, which we knew is going on. Marketable securities came down massively. And let's see. Yeah, so huge cash flow essentially came from this segment in here. And a big part of it was decreasing marketable security purchases, right? So going from 313 to 7.5. So that's why this is so advantageous, is essentially down to this line item. Repayments of debt, about the same. Not a big change there. Financing activities, right? We already know about all that. So cash equivalents, 4.2. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a lot of money to sit on. This is what, yeah, like I didn't love this. So hardware accessory sales down. So net sales here, 597 here, 451. Software also down. Collectibles also down. So net sales from these, again, like I don't love that. And it's the same thing from like the 26-week period versus the 13-week period, right? So this is giving you a slightly different comparison window. I don't love that, because I would want to see sales moving. Again, it's still positive, which is good. But again, from like an objective analysis standpoint, this reiterates to me more so than ever, something needs to happen. And again, it's also important to remember, this is why we compare typically different time frames, right? So this is looking 13 weeks, 26 weeks. It gives you different snapshots that cover different time periods. So sales is positive, which is great. And I know that there's a new console thing coming up. I think it's for PlayStation. Again, you guys would know better than I would on that. I would defer to you. But I'm not a PlayStation guy. I like Xbox. I've had that. I used to have PlayStation when I was a little kid. I remember playing like Gran Turismo on there. But we got away from PlayStation pretty quick. I don't remember why. Maybe it was Halo moved us over to Xbox with, I remember the Duke controller, this absolutely massive controller. So as I look through this, I'm interested. It doesn't look bad, but it also doesn't look like this is obviously a company that's currently outperforming. I think that's not necessarily a news flash. So for me, after looking through the financials and again, continuing to get closer to the product, I think a big part of this is just seeing where we go from here. We're at a spot, I don't want to call it make or break, because I think that's a little dramatic. I think that the company definitely has a decent runway to figure things out, but I don't think that this in and of itself is the, winner of the day, right? We've known that it's had 4 billion cash for a month now. So the question is, what do we do with it? And then the other question I have is, I do like some video games, but I have absolutely no idea what I'm looking at up here. So if anybody can help me out with what the winged, it almost looks like it looks like a Deadpool fairy to me, because this looks like a Deadpool mask. They have a sword, and then they have wings. And then these remind me of harvesters from, I forgot what game has harvesters. Maybe Gears of War? I played that a while ago with a buddy. That was kind of a strange foray. Anyways, don't know what this stuff is. Would love to know. So now, though, there is one other interesting piece of information. I looked through the options chain. Somebody is probably going to be a little bit sad with these 924 calls for $208,000. That's not looking great. And that's for this Friday. So we don't love that for them unless they're part of like a spread. But what I have this filtered by right now is I care about single leg trades. So I get rid of spreads from the filtering. But here's the other thing that I can't help but find interesting is if we take a look at GameStop, and if we take a look restricting trade size to 5,000, and we look at the last couple days, we see these blocks of 5,000 rolling in again. Now, what I find interesting about the blocks of 5,000 today were that it was kind of throughout the entire day. Whereas when we see these blocks of 5,000 yesterday, it was much more short-lived. There was a couple touches, 0650, 0655, this is Pacific time, 07. Then we see these 0840 transactions, which I have these earmarked as something I'm keeping an eye on. I see only one 0840 transaction today, and then a bunch of like 09s, 010s, or I'm sorry, not 09s, then 10s, 11s, 12s. So it's kind of like throughout the rest of the afternoon. And then if we go back further, though, we can see that these 5,000 blocks have been happening for some time now. So based on the 9th, based on the 6th, the 4th again, the 3rd, the 30th of last month, like there's lots of blocks of 5,000. The reason why I want to highlight that is because I know a lot of people think that from Roaring Kitty's previous options trades, which we're going to dive further into this coming GME live stream this coming Saturday, because last Saturday we got into the weeds and I learned a lot. But one of the things is I think people just kind of naturally attribute this size trade to him because of the options that he came into. But actually, I don't see that. Obviously, he doesn't have a monopoly on the size of 5,000. It's a nice round number. Tons of people would transact there. And I'm not saying it's not him in the near term. I have no idea. But what I'm highlighting is just that it's not relegated to him as, solo fingerprint, unique to him and only him. That's all. As always, my goal is to try and analyze information as objectively as possible. I have all sorts of crazy theories. That's literally why I have a tinfoil hat that I'll throw on when I want to get weird and start throwing opinions out there. But when I'm looking at this, I'm just trying to analyze data, interpret it as a trader, which is, again, what I primarily do. So there is build out going on though. And there's a lot of these 5,000 block contracts, but it's not, to be honest, like there's way bigger trades going on right now. So if we kill that 5,000 size requirement and we sort this by premium, like there's literally a 2 million trade that ran through. This is looking at the dark pool, by the way, for 93.3. There's 79,000 for 186 mil. So it's like, there's big trades going. And the reason why I highlight that is because it tells us that there's liquidity, right? There's not in the options market to fill those contracts at 5,000 lots. Like that's a pretty big options trade because obviously there's 100 shares per, but that's just for relative size. It's larger, 5,000 for an options market. But what I'm seeing here is that if the order goes to the lit exchange through a dark pool and then obviously hits the consolidated tape, there's still tons of liquidity here, right? So we're seeing, just blocks of 10,000 move around like it's nothing, not moving the market. that are being executed all together. And then again, we see blocks almost up to 100,000. So it just tells me that there's liquidity here. And for whatever reason, I don't know, the process of submitting like repetitive 5,000 lot trades is kind of interesting to me, because I would think of it from an efficiency standpoint of why bother doing that if you can simply get a much bigger price. Now, it would make more sense to me if these 5,000 lot contracts were being done day over day, that I would get, because it's like you're scaling into something, right? So you're buying your 5,000 on the 9th, then you buy 5,000 on the 10th, and you kind of dollar cost average into something over time. But that's not exactly what I see here. Oh, it's my brother calling. In case you guys don't know, in my phone, his name is Sasquatch, because he's a big old boy. But shout out to you, Sasquatch. Anyways, back to this. There's a lot of these going on. Some of them that happen within really tight time frames like this lead me to believe it's the same person. But the fact that this happens across the entire day is confusing and makes me more likely to believe that this isn't a single person, but likely different groups of people or different entities, don't know who, that are transacting at, their set prices. But when you look at these and you find blocks of time where it's like right around one another, like within seconds, super close time frame, that like this right here, right? 707, 710, 732, like that's all right on top of one another. So could that be 3 different people that entered an order right around the same time? Sure, it could. But again, when I see it in this tight of a compression at that exact size, I typically believe that this might be one person, but don't know. That is the mystique and mystery of trying to play this puzzle and piece things together with this kind of data. It's just so fun. It's an absolute blast. I really, really enjoy it. And a couple people were asking about when Newton and I were going to do another live stream. I actually just hit him up yesterday, and he and I we're going to look for a time. So we don't know if it's going to be able to be a live stream, but the dude's working like a dog right now. And he's trying to, maintain his cadence with his videos and stuff. So it's just challenging for him. But like I said, we text most days. So we'll find something eventually, whether it's a live stream, which I obviously really enjoy doing with you all. That would be my preference. But I also understand that, live streams are difficult timing for him. So he and I might do something recorded together in the morning, early morning, so that it accommodates his schedule. We'll figure something out. But yeah, looking forward to connecting with him again, because we have a lot to catch up on as this thing continues to evolve. So yeah, just following up. I forgot who dropped that as a comment yesterday, but I wanted to follow up with them. So that wraps me up. As always, let me know if there's anything you want me to cover, anything we should take a look at, be an outlier. I'll see you all later.